Capitalist society is making us mentally unhealthy. This is the central thesis of Erich Fromm's book, The Sane Society. In this book, he puts forth a formula that is required for humans to be mentally healthy or sane, and dissects various facets of capitalism, such as alienation and commodification, that are making us deviate from that sane standard. Although I do not agree with everything he says in this book, and I will get to that later, I do think that he paints an acute portrait of capitalist society, and I would like to share the content of this book in this video. Although an indictment of our current capitalist society is not my ultimate goal, because I do recognize that all forms of social organization have their pros and cons, I think it is still important for people to be aware of the situation that they are in, and it may help us reconsider our relationship with capitalism and reconsider the way that we want to lead our lives in order to be more sane. Fromm defines sanity as a situation where the individual is mentally healthy. As such, he rejects the position of social relativism. To speak of a whole society as lacking in mental health implies a controversial assumption contrary to the position of sociological relativism held by most social scientists today. They postulate that each society is normal in as much as it functions, and that pathology can be defined only in terms of the individual's lack of adjustment to the ways of life in this society. Instead, he argues that there should be objective standards of sanity. He bases a lot of his analysis of human psychology in Freudian terms, which I would say are, slightly questionable, but it's worth mentioning these ideas here in order to build up Fromm's argument. He writes, "In all patriarchal societies, the relationship of the son to the father is one of submission on the one hand, but of rebellion on the other. The submission to the father is different from the fixation to the mother. The latter is a continuation of the natural tie of the fixation to nature. The former is man-made, artificial, based on power and law, and therefore less compelling and forceful than the tie to the mother. While the mother represents nature and unconditioned love, the father represents abstraction, conscience, duty, law, and hierarchy. The father's love for the son is not like the unconditioned love of the mother for her children because they are her children, but it is the love for the son whom he likes best because he lives up to most of his expectations and is best equipped to become the heir to the father's property and worldly functions. Hence, the positive aspects of the patriarchal complex are reason, discipline, conscience, and individualism. The negative aspects are hierarchy, oppression, inequality, submission. These values are the building blocks of a property-based and very much patriarchal capitalism. And his argument is that the lack of the mother element prevents us from accessing certain aspects of our innately human needs, namely the connection with other people, which he deems as necessary for human sanity. He also traces the development of our society into the situation. The Jewish God of the Old Testament had been a strictly patriarchal God. In the Catholic development, the idea of the all-loving and all-forgiving mother is reintroduced. The Catholic Church herself, the all-embracing mother and the Virgin Mother symbolize the maternal spirit of forgiveness and love, while God the Father represented in the hierarchical principle of the authority to which man had to submit without complaining or rebelling. Protestantism and Calvinism went back to the purely patriarchal spirit of the Old Testament and eliminated the mother element from the religious concept. Man was not anymore enveloped by the motherly love of the Church and the Virgin. He was alone, facing a severe and strict God whose mercy he could obtain only by an act of complete surrender. But at the same time, the positive aspect of the paternal principle asserted itself in the renaissance of rational thought and individualism. This makes sense because we all know that the rise of capitalism is very much linked to the Protestant and the Calvinist work ethics. Now, he defines mental health as such. Mental health is characterized by the ability to love and to create, by the emergence from incestuous ties to clan and soil, by a sense of identity based on one's experience of self as a subject and agent of one's powers, by the grasp of reality inside and outside ourselves, that is, by the development of objectivity and reason. And notice how this is a combination of both patriarchal and matriarchal values. However, unfortunately, it is always the former that dominates our society, which makes us mentally unhealthy. As a result of the missing matriarchal elements in our lives, we have reached a state of individuation in which only the fully developed, mature personality can make fruitful use of freedom. If the individual has not developed his reason and his capacity for love, he is incapable of bearing the burden of freedom and individuality. and tries to escape into artificial ties which give him a sense of belonging and rootedness. Any regression today from freedom into artificial rootedness in state or race is a sign of mental illness. So this is his analysis of what it means to be sane and how the human situation in contemporary society has deviated from sanity. Before I give an analysis of how he portrays capitalist society as contributing to our insanity, I wish to state that Fromm's definition of mental health or sanity is very much idiosyncratic. Of course, this cannot be the universal truth, the standard definition that all psychologists or sociologists must agree on. And I do think it is a problem in his work that he does not use reasons to back up why he defines mental health as such. I'm presuming that he's drawing on the assumptions that his readership would know about certain trends in psychoanalysis of his era. But in order to understand the rest of his work, we'll just have to work from the premise of what he takes mental health to be. Firstly, from the 19th century, the living human being with his desires and woes loses more and more his central place in the system, and this place is occupied by business and production. Man ceases to be the measure of all things in the economic sphere. In other words, the use of man by man is expressive of the system of values underlying the capitalist system. Capital, the dead past, employs labour, the living vitality and power of the present. Capital stands higher than labour, amass things higher than the manifestations of life. Things are higher than man. This phenomenon is also reflected in the fact that the middle and upper class families of the 19th century have a mania for possessing and hoarding things. However, we do have a slight shift in scene as we move into the 20th century capitalism. Instead of the exploitative and hoarding orientation, we find the receptive and marketing orientation. Instead of competitiveness, we find an increasing tendency towards teamwork. Instead of a striving for ever-increasing profit, a wish for a steady and secure income. Instead of exploitation, a tendency to share and spread wealth and to manipulate others and oneself. Instead of rational and irrational but overt authority, we find anonymous authority, the authority of public opinion and the market. Instead of the individual conscience, the need to adjust and be approved of. Instead of the sense of pride and mastery, an ever-increasing, though mainly unconscious sense of powerlessness. Rather than the man who hoards and saves, the social character of the 20th century can be understood as such. It needs man who cooperates smoothly in large groups, who wants to consume more and more, and whose tastes are standardized and can be easily influenced and anticipated. It needs man who feel free and independent, not subject to any authority or principle or conscience, yet willing to be commanded to do what is expected, to fit into the social machine without friction. How can man be guided without force, led without leaders, be prompted without any aim, except the one to be on the move, to function, to go ahead? Fromm, like many thinkers, believe that one of the biggest problems associated with capitalism is that of alienation. This is absolutely nothing new. But the way that he analysed the roots of this problem is a bit different from most accounts that I've read. Most accounts tend to focus on the breakdown of religious faith, local communities, the ties of a big family, etc. Although these are influential factors, Fromm offers his own analysis of the causes in terms of what he called abstractification and quantification. He discusses abstractification as such. There are two ways of relating oneself to an object. One can relate oneself to it in its full concreteness, and one can relate oneself to the object in an abstract way. In contemporary Western culture, this polarity has given way to an almost exclusive reference to the abstract qualities of things and people, and to a neglect of relating oneself to their concreteness and uniqueness. Quantification, on the other hand, is the increasing tendency to view things in terms of their exchange value. When one speaks of the $3 million bridge, one is not primarily concerned with its usefulness or beauty, that is, with its concrete qualities, but one speaks of it as of a commodity, the main quality of which is its exchange value expressed in a quantity, that of money. Its concrete use value is secondary to its abstract exchange value. In fact, we can apply both concepts not only to objects but also to people. People are also experienced as the embodiment of a quantitative exchange value. To speak of a man as being worth $1 million is to speak of him not anymore as a concrete human person, but as an abstraction. If it is said that a shoe manufacturer dies, the richness and concreteness of a human life is expressed in the abstract formula of economic function. Another consequence is that people become so detached from what they're dealing with on a daily basis. People become unaware of the origins of the things that they interact with because these objects just become manufactured with increasing complexity. People are able to undertake tasks that in fact involve so much complexity, such as calling someone on the telephone, but it only really requires very simple actions on their behalf. This means that people are increasingly out of touch with the world as it is, becoming boxed up in isolated man-made versions of reality. And Baudrillard also explores this idea quite well in his book Simulacra and Simulation. Indeed, the dimensions with which we deal are figures and abstractions. They are far beyond the boundaries which would permit of any kind of concrete experience. There is no frame of reference left which is manageable, observable, which is adapted to human dimensions. Now, let's talk about alienation. By alienation is meant a mode of experience in which the person experiences himself as an alien. He has become, one might say, estranged from himself. He does not experience himself as the center of his world, as the creator of his own acts, but his acts and their consequences have become his masters, whom he obeys and whom he may even worship. The alienated person is out of touch with himself as he is out of touch with any other person. Fromm believes that alienation in modern society is a direct result of the above two factors, abstractification and quantification, because we're solely living in a world of man-made things and social concepts or structures that are of increasing complexity. Man ceases to feel like the master of these things. He becomes powerless and subjugated by the artificial world around him. There is also this very interesting side note that Fromm makes about the quantification of life itself. A new question has arisen in every modern man's mind, the question namely, whether life is worth living. And correspondingly, the feeling that one's life is a failure or is a success. This idea is based on the concept of life as an enterprise which should show a profit. It has to do with the whole balance concept of life as an enterprise which can fail. Many cases of suicide are caused by the feeling that life has been a failure and that it is not worthwhile living anymore. One commits suicide just as a businessman declares his bankruptcy when losses exceed gains and when there is no more hope of recuperating the losses. This whole process has created a subtle evil in our system, that is the submission to an anonymous force. And this anonymous force is what we usually call the market. It is not overt authority, but anonymous, invisible, alienated authority. Nobody makes a demand, neither a person nor an idea nor a moral law. Nobody is an authority except it. What is it? Profit, economic necessities, the market, common sense, public opinion, what one does, thinks, feels. As long as there was overt authority, there was conflict and there was rebellion against irrational authority. But if I am not aware of submitting or rebelling, if I am ruled by an anonymous authority, I lose the sense of self. I become a one, a part of the it. We are all familiar with the age-old saying that desires in capitalist society are primarily not authentic but manufactured by advertising. It is via such means that production can continue to expand. The economy can continue to grow only if its customers increasingly want more goods. However, there are also deeper implications rising from this phenomenon. When one is numbed by incessant advertising and endless media available for passive consumption, his understanding of pleasure or desire, or what he ought to desire in order to make himself happy, becomes distorted into a situation where having fun consists mainly in the satisfaction of consuming and taking in commodities, sights, food, drinks, cigarettes, people, lectures, books, movies. As a consequence, it follows that happiness cannot be found in the state of inner passivity and in the consumer attitude which pervades the life of alienated man. Happiness is to experience fullness, not emptiness which needs to be filled. The average man today may have a good deal of fun and pleasure, but in spite of this, he is fundamentally depressed. Perhaps it's better to use the word bored. Actually, there is very little difference between the two, except a little difference in degree, because boredom is nothing but the experience of a paralysis of our productive powers and the sense of unaliveness. I've watched a Japanese TV show lately called Tokyo Ghoul, which excellently exemplifies this idea. The protagonist Aya seeks whatever society deems as valuable.
予約の取れないレストラン、代理店の彼氏、やりがいのある仕事、六本木ヒルズ、バージンシネマのレイトショー、一泊二日の箱根旅行、ハリー・ウィンストンの婚約指輪、 幸せな結婚、人生をコンプリートするためのアイテム。
She believes that the key to her happiness must lie in the form of consuming or attaining something that is valued by her society. There is not one moment where she has been depicted in the show to look inside herself and seriously consider what she really wants as an individual. She never realizes that all her desires have been passively manufactured. In the end of the series, Aya fails to find true fulfillment in her life, and the plot ends with her continuing her search. And this is such an acute portrayal of the tragedy of the modern person. Fromm offers a specific form of democratic socialism as a better way to structure our society so that people are rescued from the evils of capitalism and return to sanity. His central critique against existing forms of socialism that have been practiced and are continue to be practiced across the world is that these socialist policies focus only in remedying the economic wrongs of capitalism rather than the psychological aspects that he is calling people's attention towards. And he has used examples such as the Soviet Union and some of the nationalization socialist policies of Margaret Thatcher in the UK. So for example, he said that the nationalisation of transport and energy in the UK did not really fix workers' problems because they have really just changed from being employed by individual people to the state. The reality of their working conditions did not change. Instead, democratic socialism must return to and concentrate on the human aspects of the social problem, must criticise capitalism from the standpoint of what it does to the human qualities of man, to his soul and his spirit, and must consider any vision of socialism in human terms, asking in what way a socialist society will contribute towards ending the alienation of man, the idolatry of economy and of the state. The key aim is for labour to employ capital rather than capital employ labour, to make workers feel like they have some sort of meaningful active participation in the work that they do. Some concrete proposals include: the first condition for an active participation of the worker is that he is well informed not only about his own work but about the performance of the whole enterprise. His whole attitude towards his work would be different if he had a wider knowledge of all the technical problems involved in the production of the whole product. If the technical process employed in the factory is an object of interest and knowledge to the worker, if his own thinking process is stimulated by such knowledge, even the otherwise monotonous technical work he has to perform will assume a different aspect. Another knowledge is necessary, that of the economic function of the enterprise he is working for and its relationship to the economic needs and problems of the community. Proposals in other areas include setting up small units of social organizations, either like across the neighborhood or in the workplace, that allows each individual to input opinion, establishing practices of collective art where people can express themselves and connect with others, and etc. Now, here are some of my opinions on his proposals. Firstly, I do like the part about giving workers some sort of meaningful participation in the work they do, because I can testify personally that it worked for me. So as I've mentioned before that I did a vacation scheme at a law firm this summer. I thoroughly enjoyed my time there, and after reading Fromm's work, I am able to better pinpoint why I enjoyed my time there, because I realized that my firm really employed these aspects of solutions that Fromm has discussed. So for example, I clearly did not love every single task that I was given, and that's totally normal and acceptable. No one would love every single task they do at their job. But I was always told how my small task would contribute to this overall bigger case that a certain senior associate or partner is working on. And because I am very fascinated with the case overall, because I'm just really interested in the field, it made me happy about what I'm doing. It feels like I'm contributing and what I'm doing is meaningful, and it makes me feel like in the future, later down my career, I would have the chances of participating in a more bigger, meaningful role. We were also given a lot of social opportunities to connect with others on the VAC scheme or other solicitors working at the firm. And it was this part of the social culture that I really enjoyed. So I can testify that job satisfaction is something that relates to factors much beyond the tasks themselves. However, I do not think that all parts of his solutions are viable. So for example, he talked about those small units of social organisation in the neighbourhood or in the workplace to meet regularly, headed by somebody. Opinions of every single person are collected and passed upwards. Having spent my childhood in China, I can tell you that they exist in China. They're basically called 街道居委会. But the thing is, they are practically useless. I have not met a single adult in my life who said that they've gone to one of their meetings and made some sort of meaningful contribution that changed their neighborhood. Most of the time the representatives just make decisions themselves and we just go with it because they're not huge decisions. No one really cares or have the time in their life to go meet every week. The thing is, this is a form of forced communitarian life and a lot of people don't want to participate in these meetings. But if people do not, then the democratic socialist project falls apart. But if we force people to attend, then we're not really respecting the wishes of individuals. We have a diversity of personalities in our society and some people just prefer a more solitary life and they don't want to mess with those kind of things. I think a similar argument applies to his suggestion of what he called collective art. He in fact favours it over individualistic artistic creations. Again, this is problematic because it is a form of forced social participation. Of course, these forms of socializing are good for people who want to participate in them, but it comes bad if we try to mandate it across the board. Collective art is also problematic because it can be seen as a mouthpiece for the expression of some community overall. The distortion and forced conformity of people's beliefs and value systems can easily occur in this sphere. So do I have a better solution to what Fromm proposed? Well, honestly I don't. After all, I'm just a philosophy student. What do I know? If I know what to do, I'll probably be running for political campaigns right now. But I think what we can do for ourselves, at least, is what I have mentioned at the beginning of this video. We should try to become aware of how capitalism is negatively affecting our mental health. This is the first step to help many of us return to sanity. There are definitely small steps each individual can take, whether in adjusting their values or their lifestyle, to combat this epidemic of insanity. For example, personally, I've been consciously reducing my desire to consume unnecessary goods, shifting my desires away from what society values to focus on what I authentically want and what I think will bring me true fulfillment. I would also very much love to hear you guys comment what you think about the system and what you have been doing to preserve your mental health in the modern society. And again, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video.